done. It's been almost more professional than some events I speak at, you know, but they hardly know your name, so it's really, thank you for everything. It's made me feel really welcome. Thank you also to Google, and thank all of you for the space, and thank all of you for coming. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you for about an hour and a quarter, maybe actually an hour and 10 minutes, and we'll then have time for questions. So, but if you do, during the process of what we're talking about, if you have any questions, you can of course put up your hand and ask. You know, I'm not a prima donna or a drama queen, so, you know, just, in fact, you can shout at me and throw papers and, you know, do whatever you want. I'm a tough guy, I can handle whatever you throw at me, so don't need to be polite or anything like that. We're all here to learn, and you know, impatient people are often very interesting people. So my messages today then, well, first of all, the thing about entrepreneurship, and I work in the entrepreneurship department of IE Business School, there is a section where I'm going to talk a bit about what I've in my past, but the big thing I just want to get across is that there's an association between entrepreneurship and innovation in startups, and I'm actually not as keen on either of those words. I'm actually more keen on the word sustainability rather than the word innovation, and the word scale up rather than startup. I think my kind of divorce from the word innovation came when I came across a perfume by David Beckham in a duty-free once, which was called Innovation. And I said from that moment on, I could never promote innovation as being anything, that the world was irreparably damaged. And then startup is possibly comes from the fact that when I set up my first company, or at least all my companies have been co-founded, and but it was starting up was a kind of a big deal in the sense that it was really hard to do. There were no incubators, there was no kind of government money or anything like that. You had to somehow get together the resources and you know, do something literally out of your garage. And now I think that in many ways startups have become too easier. You have wonderful spaces like this, and you know. Accelerators and incubators, so in some ways it's made too easy. So I think of the startup phase as really just the primary phase, and the scale-up phase is when everything gets interesting. So I'm going to talk a bit more about that. The talk is in 5 stages. I'll just talk a bit about who I am first. In Ireland we always say, who are you and why should I listen to you? So we have to kind of cover some of that. I'm going to talk about innovation and sustainability, which was something that I was been pushing away at for a long time. And a lot of people associate the word sustainability with the environmental movement, and then they were kind of suspicious of it. But actually just last night, Tim O'Reilly posted something on Quartz just about how, you know, sustainability was a more interesting word than innovation. So just to this, for about 24 hours, I'm feeling very clever, because it's good to have somebody sort of talk that a lot of these companies we glorify, everything from Uber to Facebook, they're very innovative, but they're not very sustainable. You know, I'm going to perhaps say things like Facebook is tomorrow's MySpace and that kind of thing. Then we're going to have a few contrast to startup and scale up. And I guess the thing here is the fact that a lot of people who are in startups, you know, don't really know what they're doing, and that's a very strong kind of phrase to make. Peter Drucker famously said that most entrepreneurship is risky because entrepreneurs don't know what they're doing. And I've started 6 companies, and for the first 3 of them, I didn't know what I was doing. And it was really until one of them kind of failed badly that the first one, we were probably more lucky than we were good. And that's actually, you know, while it's a good thing to happen to you, it's also very sobering when one does go badly. So I talk a lot about the idea of knowing exactly what it is you're trying to do in a startup, and I think I can be very helpful to you in that area. And then the second thing is the idea of scaling up. And you know, the idea of that you have like 0.4 of companies ever, startups are ever success, and 0.04 ever scale up. So the numbers are actually horrendous. The numbers are absolutely horrendous. And you know, that sort of atmosphere around, I used to do a lot of mountain climbing, and you know, you sort of see people who are aware of the numbers of people who get to the summit and stuff like that. And there was much more awareness of that. And in startups, I don't see that level of awareness. Most people sort of think they're going to make it, whereas statistically, that's not the case. I'm going to give some examples, finally. Most people I speak to, most crowds are actually, can be older, so they really like what I'm going to say, which is to say that actually the examples of really good startups tend to be created by older people. The average age of a successful founder is actually 45 years of age. So most guys in your 20s, you're really going to be starting. And really, statistically, to give money to a 20-year-old is just literally wasting money. Not everyone wants to hear that message, but it's not a bad message, and we're going to go. That's what the data tells us. And then finding info is really just a whole pile of books, reports, and podcasts in areas in which you can learn more about this. So who am I? I'm from Ireland, and I've been 15 years now in Spain. So that's almost longer than I've been anywhere else, because I moved around a lot in Ireland and also lived in 8 countries. So I've lived in Madrid longer than I've lived anywhere else. So that's quite fun. Actually, it's funny. I spent about 10 months of the year in Madrid and 2 months in Galicia. So people talk to me about Sol and Playa, where actually my Spain looks a bit more like that. My wife is from Galicia. And so it doesn't look a lot that different to Ireland, which is, makes me kind of feel at home. And the thing about Ireland, of course, and there may be people who've worked here in Ireland, there's certainly an awful lot of Spanish people. A lot of Spanish people quite like the idea of going and spending time there working with one of those big scaling companies in Ireland, and then maybe they get sick of the bad weather and the bad tomatoes and come home. The tomatoes is the thing that fascinates me. Every time I go over, I have to bring these big things of tomatoes. It seems to be the thing, that people, Spanish people want and miss the most. The tomatoes in Ireland don't taste very good. Anyway, why am I talking about tomatoes? Anyway, here, let's continue. So what I'm talking about is companies that scale. So Ireland has an awful lot of these, and when I lived in Dublin, the word scale, this would have been like in 1998, even though I'm from the West Coast, rather than from the capital. I think it's a good idea that you should always live in your capital city. And when I lived in Dublin, there were a lot of companies that were scaling. So the word was used an awful lot. So even though I still come across people who've never heard the word scale before, scale up before, it was a word that was very commonly used in Dublin. And you'd meet a lot of people who'd say, oh yeah, we were scaling up this company or whatever. So they would arrive with 50 people, and then they would have plans for that to go to 500 people. So, they're very kind of interesting to talk about how that would happen, and usually it involved opening offices and things like that rather than the product, which I'm going to focus on later. And when we set up this company called Marrakech, I was working as a management consultant like a lot of people, and we set up this company called Marrakech. It was myself and 5 others, and we raised in total of $75 million. That's not like used to be a lot of money. But actually, that's what it used to cost to build companies before there were accelerators and all sorts of things. And we scaled that to about 250 people. So it gave me a real interest in this whole journey of scaling and this whole, how is this done properly? And there was really nothing out there. I mean, you've got to take for granted the work of Steve Blank and Eric Ries and Alex Osterwalder and all these people. And they're great books that help you. And, but there was really none of that back in 1999. There was really no manual. What most people thought was that a big company and a small company are largely the same. So somebody who was a good operator in a big company would be a good operator in a small company. And of course, that's completely wrong. If you're working for Coca-Cola, say, you have marketing skills that are completely useless in a startup, where you've got to hustle and you don't have a brand and a budget and things like that. So we hired people from like Oracle who had a real technological advantage, and those were the wrong kind of people to hire. So there were a whole lot of other kind of things that we did badly. And the company was eventually sold, and then I sort of came to Madrid. Really I love the way this is on camera, so I can say this. I sort of came to Madrid as a socially acceptable way of doing nothing. I thought it would always have me you have to do something with your life. So, I guess I speak English and I have a master's in accounting and finance, so an MBA was quite an easy thing for me to do. So I came to Madrid and had a lot of fun. And the first weekend I was here, I met a girl who's now my wife, so I've never had a bad experience in Madrid. Madrid has been fun for me ever. The worst experience is to be surrounded by everything wonderful in Madrid, but not being able to engage with it. So Madrid has been a very positive experience for me right from the beginning. So we scaled to about 250 people, and the company was eventually sold. This is where I now work. I spend about half my time teaching in IE and about half my time running companies. I'm actually, there's a picture. The pictures there reflect our diversity. I'm actually in the bottom right-hand corner, so if you stop the traffic lights and you look over, you can see me. I guess I represent the tall, pale-skinned, Irish-looking guy in amongst all the other beautiful people. I have to say, I see people at like 8 in the morning looking absolutely fabulous, and I wonder how they do it. I can just about drag myself out of bed. But that's the beauty of diversity, and it's a great thing about teaching in IE that, there may be IE alumni here, but about 90% of the people are not from Spain, and even the people from Spain generally had, their parents were in Germany or from Germany, and they grew up in it, whatever. So they're very kind of internationalized. So it's a really interesting place. I always say, instead of reading about China and The Economist, you actually ask Chinese people about yourself. So I think it's really fascinating. I was just in China recently doing an IE trip, and I was talking to people from ByteDance about TikTok. It was absolutely, what they were telling me was incredible. It was information I would never have got from The Economist or the Financial Times or anything like that. Really interesting about how they do what they do, and that's the kind of thing you get from having these students, and it's a really, really interesting place to teach, and that's why I do it. I teach 4 courses, and they're all in the area of scale-up. The one is the Owners Scaleup Program, which is a company who are about to scale up. And then there's also a program that we do with Beirut, which is a joint venture. The Lebanese are among the best entrepreneurs in the world. I mean, they say that everywhere you go in the world, you meet Irish people and Lebanese, because we're like small countries, so we have to get out and kind of see the world. And I also teach HIOP, which is the program that Maria took, and I'm going to talk a bit about that in a second, because it's a hell of a ride. And then finally I teach in the MBA. There's sort of, different schools I teach in. Both I teach global affairs, where I talk about exponential technologies and how they affect humanity. So that's criticizing Facebook a lot. And then I also teach in the human sciences. And then there are 3 companies that I jump between the two, just where the word kangaroo comes from. This is Hotels. Myself and 3 founders, we founded this company, and we were the first Spanish company to accelerate by TechStars in the USA, which was a really interesting experience. So other companies have gone since and been accelerated, but so I spent a summer in Boston with people mostly half my age, so it was just really interesting to be at the forefront. I mean, that cohort, some of them have gone on to raise a lot of money, some of them were on Shark Tank and things like that, so it's really interesting to be there. I'm also somewhat in the world of crypto. This is a P2P sharing site. A former student of mine set this up, and I stayed in contact. It's called Bright. And then also this is a whiskey distillery, not surprisingly for an Irishman, and keeping up the cliches. But I put it up there for the sense of just talking about that it's not just tech. The guy in the picture is Seamus, who's a guy I went to school with, and he did all the work. But I sort of advise him on what to do and things like that. And it's funny about coaching and stuff like that is something I was very suspicious of. And for years, and I thought coaching is very American, and how your feelings and all this kind of stuff. And but it's actually really valuable. I'm a total convert to the idea of having somebody you can talk with who you trust, and that's really the role I provide for Seamus. 99% honest with his employees. He can only be 99% honest. There's always one, even with his wife, he can only be like 99% honest about how the company is going. So in that sense, it's really useful to have somebody who just keeps asking him the important questions. And it's a key part of scaling. I mean, I can pass information about startups, and that's really interesting and things, but in scaling, it's actually more of an ongoing process. It's like something that you work at over time. How do you hire certain people? How do you, if you're raising money, how do you improve products and things like that? It's a process that really needs to be coached. So while you can be mentored, which is a sort of, in a startup, in a scale-up thing, you really need to be coached. So this is the famous Drucker line, which some people sort of raise and jump and clap and things like that, and say, finally somebody says it, because this is very true. And as I say, I've co-founded 6 companies, and then probably for the first 3 or 4 of them, maybe even now, I still don't know what I'm doing. I mean, it's just one of those things. But the amount of people who never actually really sit down and work out what they're doing, they just kind of carry along what they're doing, really surprises me. And it is something. It's like anything else that you have to kind of really work at getting good at. It's not something that you're naturally good at. Even like professional recruiters and people who hire people for a living will say that if they get 6 out of 10 people right, that's a really good kind of the number. But if you think about, even if you're not an expert recruiter, how can you possibly kind of get to that level unless you really work at being a recruiter? So, it's not just about turning up for work. You have to be very focused in terms of what you're doing and in terms of getting better. So this is the program that we do, we give in IE Business School, and it's called the Owners Scaleup Program. So there's about 20 people in it from all over the world, and there's a week in April and then a week in October. And this is basically what we do. And we don't cover very much of the accounting and finance, because mostly you hire people to do those things. You don't do them themselves. It deals with the, what I call the unblocking. So there's things along the way that most people get wrong, and I've sort of identified those with my experience, and then I try and deal specifically with those. So so something that doesn't really make a lot of sense until you've done it at the end. For instance, there's a session on pricing, and that's most people got their pricing completely wrong. In fact, if someone asked me if there's one thing that you would change in, that most people who you speak to get wrong, pricing. There was one guy that after the session, he came up to me and he said, "Listen, Joe, I'm going to fly back to Germany tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, what happened? Sorry, I hope there was nothing bad." And he said, No. He said, "Listen, I've been doing this all wrong for about 10 years, and I can't wait till the end of the week." He said, "I've called my team, we're going to meet tomorrow, and we're going to he was basically doing what a lot of people do, which is try to increase the volume rather than try to increase the price. And we were trying to explain to him as to why that's not a good idea. So many people get that wrong, but there's all sorts of other sessions. You'll see, for instance, there's a session on high performance and dealing with you as an individual. And a lot of stuff is coming from sport and how people perform, because much more of success now is about moments. It's about being really good in the specific moments rather than kind of ongoing performance. People are still with this notion of 9 to 5 for 5 days or something. Actually, success is about being brilliant for an hour a day, maybe 1 day a week, rather than anything else. So when someone tells you that, you go, "Oh yeah," but unless somebody tells you that, you don't know that. So there's a whole lot of stuff that people are really getting wrong, and it's terrible to see people working really hard at the wrong thing, and I see it all the time. A talk I was giving in Ireland last week, a guy said to me, "I wish I'd met you 10 years ago," and it was a sort of I was like, well, I wish too, but you could hear in his voice that he was working really hard, but doing the wrong things, So, I mean, you don't have to be in Silicon Valley anymore. I mean, I lived in Silicon Valley for a while, and I used to go to the talks in Stanford and all of that, and that was really what you had to do to kind of get plugged into the ecosystem. Now, the information is available in podcasts and streaming, and you can hear the information almost immediately. I mean, someone in San Francisco and someone in San Jose or something is, they in some ways they're just as far away as someone from San Francisco or someone from Madrid. In that, famously VCs don't invest in the city and that kind of thing. So, that's a sort of an interesting way to think about it, that we live in a fantastic time. And I see talks on the internet of, fantastic entrepreneurs with really good information to give, and then I look at how many people have watched it, and there's 400 people, So, we really live in a time when the information is absolutely available. You have to kind of dedicate yourself to get at it. And maybe sometimes taking a course like this, it really just opens up a kind of a sense of, lays out the framework for you. I mean, what I like to say to entrepreneurs is there's about 20 or 30 things that seem to hold across organizations that you should not do. I can't tell you what you need to do in your company because, of course, that's industry specific. So you will know more about your stuff. But what I probably can tell you are things you will encounter and problems, things you should not do. So I kind of put a base. It's almost like using a football analogy. If your team is losing badly, you fix the defense first. You fix the defense first, get a goal quickly, catch the ball and that kind of stuff, and then work from there on trying to score goals. So this is sort of what we do in this course. This is the joint venture in Lebanon, which is very similar. And this is the course then that Maria took. This is the high-up, and this is a kind of an interesting combination of lots of things. You get a whole pile of short videos from me, which is basically me, angry and aggressive, but in a computer, which is nice and safe. And I can shout at you and tell you things in this kind of aggressive way. And I talk about, and we also combine this then with you get a short video, and you get a reading, and then you engage in a forum, and then you have an online course, which is an online session, which is actually more like a TV show rather than an actual class, because all of the people are coming in on screens. So this is basically the new way of learning. But just if you look at that screen, you'll see that there are 6 types of startups. And this is something, again, that's not really well known. If you say to me, "Oh, you have a startup," I would say, "What kind of a startup is it?" And most people would find that to be a surprising question. So if you look at the different types of startups, for instance, you have a lifestyle startup, which is something like yoga or a surf shop or something like that, or mountaineering, or there's something you want to do with your life and that's important to you, and you need a business around it just to kind of enable you to do it. And that's fine, but it's a certain kind of startup. Then you have a small business startup, which is basically like a refugee or something who's just kind of trying to kind of get enough money to feed their family, so it's like a corner shop or something. And again, that's a real business and should be regarded as such, but it's a different thing. Then you have a Bible startup, and this is one of the things that people are not very well aware about, and it's really important to know. Like a Bible startup is something that the Israelis do very well, which is they identify something that a bigger company isn't doing, and they basically create a product, and they become such an irritation that they almost force the company to buy them. And it's not really, it's a very different thing to if what you were doing was to buy something to defeat an existing incumbent. That's a different kind of company. To that in a second. But a Bible startup is very much like getting in the face of somebody where you literally become such an annoyance, and it has a very kind of proactive way of doing your stuff. So if you're a Bible startup, that's a different thing. I mean, arguably, the whiskey business that we sold 2/3 of it just before the summer was a Bible startup. We created brand, we created kind of, this idea of an artisan distillery, and then we were acquired by a company who could do very good manufacturing and have very good distribution. I mean, the war between a startup and an incumbent is really, does one get innovation before one gets distribution? So I'll say that once again because it's really important. So what you need to do if you're a startup and you can get distribution, you will win. If you're an incumbent and you can get innovation, then you will win. So that's where the battle is. So what we were able to do is we were able to give them innovation because they then had distribution and manufacturing. Next kind of startup is a social startup, which there's an awful lot of interest in, and those are things like education and healthcare and those kind of things. So it's just not about money; it's about making a difference. And we're seeing an increasing amount of companies, social entrepreneurs, and some of them are really fascinating, and some of them are wonderful stories. And it's a very interesting space and just as valid a space as any other kind of startup. Then you have large company startups where that's about that the large company will take the risks. So you go to your large company and say, you guys want innovation, you're not really good at it, why don't you give me some resources, let me kind of go to the side, not interrupt the main organization, let me just start something, and if it works, then we can plug it back into the organization. And that way then the person doesn't take the personal risk, they don't have to mortgage their house or do anything like that, or lose their kind of pension rights or all these kind of things. But of course, they don't get the risk then. But for some people, that's not important. Some people do set up companies and they want to, get $100 million or something like that. But some people just want to see if they can get a piece of technology to work. And that then is a large company startup. And then finally, what I'm here mostly to talk about today is a scalable startup. And this is really what we talk about. And this is this idea of creating something that, gets so big that it defeats the incumbent and then becomes the main way of doing things. Just in terms of the MBA, in case anyone, I don't do PowerPoints anymore for the MBA. I mean, one of the great things about Madrid is that we have so many really great entrepreneurs. When I came here 15 years ago, there was almost no entrepreneurs here. And now you just look at some of the names of the great companies, and people, Kleiner Perkins investing 40 million here, and things like that are absolutely spectacular. Excel making their investments. So there's some fantastic entrepreneurs around in Madrid, and it's another reason why you guys as entrepreneurs should be talking to these people and asking them specific questions. Most people, I know certainly, anyone who's ever reached out to me, I've done my best to try and meet with them, and most of these people will be exactly the same. I mean, I vary the 15 people that give talks, but it's a wonderful. You just invite them to come along. There's no PowerPoint. We just start talking with them, and it's a really interesting way of learning, and they're all very open to tell their stories. I mean, Joaquin Mencia, who's was really incredible what he told us about his company. I mean, I knew a bit about his company and that kind of thing, but even the class were quite shocked at how open he was prepared to be about the company. And that was, I joked to him afterwards, maybe he was like, speaking your second language, you tend to give more information, right? Isn't that what people say? That's certainly what the journalists say when they're interviewing Spanish executives. They say, try and get them to talk in English because they'll give out more information. When they speak in Spanish, they sort of don't give out as much. But, so this has been really interesting. So, we live in a great moment. There's lots of money in Madrid, and there's lots of expertise as well. So, in one way, we live in a great moment. There's another aspect in which we don't live in a great time, but I'll get to that in a second. So, I spent about 20 weeks of the year traveling, where am I here? Colombia and Malta and Portugal and various places, just back from China and Japan. And, that's about kind of getting out again and sort of seeing the world. when you come from a small country, it's just it's a privilege to get out and speak to people. Just talking to entrepreneurs in Turkey, for instance, it's really interesting the struggles they have. Sometimes it makes you appreciate, even in Colombia, like there's a great spirit now in Colombia of can-do after all the years of violence they had. There's a real spirit of can-do. And of course, I was in Portugal as well, and the Portuguese are very happy with themselves with the Web Summit and Farfetch and these kind of great companies that they're building. So that was really interesting. I also go on TV whenever I get invited, which is like unusual. Some of you might be able to note that I've been invited both on Intereconomia and on the Sexta, so the right-wing TV and the left-wing TV. So it's maybe being a foreigner, you get the benefits of these things. I also do Al Jazeera, which was kind of okay, except for the fact that I was making a very serious point about youth unemployment, and Papa Smurf was in the background jumping up and down. So, and I didn't realise, because when you're on live TV, you only have the sound in your ear, you don't have any camera. So I knew there was something wrong with the producer. I was wondering, what am I saying? Am I saying something stupid? No, it was the fact that Papa Smurf was jumping up and down behind me. That was sort of giving them a bit of the problem. So yeah, and then that's Irish television, which is always interesting. I tend to give some political analysis. My degree was in politics, so which is funny now the way tech is getting involved with politics. Airbnb in some ways is just as much a political company as a technology company. So that's really interesting now. And I'm on the evaluation committee for the MIT Innovators Under 35. So that's sort of really interesting to see just the different companies that are coming from the different countries in the world. And MIT is very prestigious, so we're really happy to do that. So the introduction over with, let's talk about innovation and let's talk about sustainability. And good to see that there's nobody throwing any papers at me or shouting or anything. So anyway, let's try and buck that up a bit. And you're kind of laughing at my jokes. Kind of. I felt them small bit. You can laugh more if you want. So anyway, it's all Peter Drucker's fault. So let's talk about this man, Peter Drucker, who's of course is kind of literally the father of management. And he famously said that all a company does is innovation and marketing, which is news to an awful lot of companies. And but those are essentially what companies do. Everything else is cost. Now that's an interesting way of thinking about a company. And he was just trying to make the point about that. What you have to do is something distinctive. It was one of the things that really surprised me before I came to Spain. All the companies I've worked in, marketing was always central. Basically, there was always a marketing person in every meeting. And then in Spain, it turned out that marketing was seen as people who print brochures and organize events. I was kind of really surprised at that. And there was just really no emphasis on marketing. And you see it in an awful lot of Spanish products. I was with Ethex this morning having the same kind of conversation with them that I've had a million times before about how to brand Spain properly. And sometimes I end up, that was the talk I gave in China, explaining how football, fashion, and food, how Spain has really scaled up and professionalized these industries. And Ethex was like, yeah, I guess we have. I'm like, yeah, but you should have told me this. I shouldn't be telling you this. So, and there is a kind of a thing that Spain needs to work harder on marketing and that kind of stuff. And but this word innovation is this word that no CEO that you ever ask will ever say, oh, innovation is a bad thing. Everyone's pro-innovation, innovation. And the interesting thing about the word innovation is that for most of history, innovators were bad things. And in fact, I would argue that in many companies, there's really just lip service paid to innovation. You need some level of innovation, but it's mostly execution. In the same way that in a company, you need some level of you need an idea to begin with, but it's the execution is what really matters. And most entrepreneurs, when they fall down in this follow-up rather than the actual, they have good ideas and they have skills and they have everything they need, they're just bad at follow-up. Follow-up is the thing, in my experience, that makes the difference between a successful entrepreneur and a bad entrepreneur. And the idea of having innovation and constant innovation is not really what you need. In fact, a lot of companies, you could argue, don't really have very much innovation at all. What they have is execution. If you in Google in Dublin, for instance, I know friends, and they say, yeah, it's mostly, innovation is kind of decided at the top level, and mostly what they do is execution. You can sell it. And you find that in a lot of companies. So, that's getting too hung up on the need to constantly innovate. And in most cases, you need to find a plan and execute on the plan rather than continually innovating. And you have these companies here, Uber, Facebook, Alibaba, and Airbnb, and they are very innovative companies in the sense that innovation is defined as connecting the unconnected. So, what you have is all of these companies, that's what they've done. They've connected the unconnected. Very few of them have invented anything per se, and what they've managed to do is connect the unconnected. So they're all very innovative companies. But the question is, are they sustainable? And that's the question that more and more we have to ask. I mean, Uber, they're only pay for 41% of their trips, for instance. So their business is selling dollars for 41 cents, which is not a business. Now that's getting better. They have a new CEO and that kind of stuff, but they're still, the customers do not pay the cost of what they're doing, which is again not a business. Facebook, we all know about Facebook, and anyone that does follow me will know that I'm a tremendous critic of Facebook, even though I have friends who work there, and I can respect what they've done well, but I can't ignore the other things. And most of my students now are off Facebook. They've deleted Facebook and they're not using it at all. And just the cavalier, Zuckerberg just keeps on apologizing for doing something. Sorry, I'd never do it again, and he does it again. So that kind of issue. The famous thing is, if you're not paying for something, then you're the product, and we can't ignore that kind of stuff. So we're starting to see, and the idea of joining Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook has to be like the dumbest idea since taking dinosaurs off the island. It's really somebody laughed. So that's quite extraordinary. I mean, that really is for all sorts of reasons. So that's what will start making people to basically leave Facebook and migrate to Signal and Telegram and that kind of stuff. So then you have Alibaba, and the questions for Alibaba are, they're on both sides of the transaction. Alipay and Alibaba, so there are questions about, whether they're a house of cards, and nothing has been proven and all of that. And I actually do own some Alibaba stock, but there are a lot of questions about it. And then finally Airbnb, and the thing about Airbnb is that it doesn't compete with hotels. In fact, it actually is a good thing for hotels. Where it hurts is, people who want to, communities and things like that. But you have all of these companies, like Facebook is killing news. So if it kills all news, there's no news to share. End of Facebook. Airbnb creates people, want to stay in certain communities because they're interesting parts of cities. So what happens then is that everyone becomes Airbnb, and then people don't want to stay there anymore. So you see the way if you kill the ecosystem, and then you've nothing left. So this is an issue about anything that grows very quickly can collapse very quickly. And that's something we've got to be aware of. And this is the most dramatic way of explaining that, which is to, sometimes I get gasps of people when I say, and other people, like, the phones come out and stuff like that. This isn't my most Instagram slide, that's coming later, but it's certainly one of them. But this idea of growth, for the sake of growth, is something that, there's no venture capitalists. In fact, some of them say, like, everything is growth and everything is sales. But actually, this is something to think about it, that if what your activity kills the very thing that you need to survive, it's like in Iceland, if you chop down all the trees, and then they wonder why they have no forests and can't build boats, because they chop down all the trees. So this is you have to kind of ask this about questions, that it's possible sometimes to do things very quickly, but you do it in such a way that you kill the very part of the ecosystem. The best businesses are businesses that work with the ecosystem. In that sense, businesses are like nature itself. Nature itself is absolutely fascinating. One of the things since I started studying scale-ups is I've become very aware of nature and the relationships between nature. And there's a book I'm going to refer to that explains all the different laws of nature and how it all works. And there's a saying which is that nature takes its time, but everything is accomplished. And once you start to sort of really understand this, it's quite remarkable. Like all of the things that occur, everything from seasons, like it all has a reason, and it all has a very good thing. And even the way that nature renews itself, despite our great efforts to try and kill it, is absolutely spectacular. I mean, Madrid is a wonderful place to live, but our air quality is terrible, and that's something, like in fact, the worst place, among the worst air quality in all of Madrid is the Retiro, and you see people jogging every evening around it, So that's including me. And that's a sort of something to think about. So this is what you need to think about, that you need growth, but you need to have it in a sustainable way that works with the ecosystem rather than something that trashes the ecosystem. So this then is the sustainability, and this is kind of the magic word, and why we need to work on that. And this is the idea that everyone encourages everyone to be creative. In fact, this is what I tell my students in day one of class, which is that you need three things to be a success. You need creativity, communication, and working in teams. Those are the skills I try to teach you. All of the other stuff I go on about is really not that important. Those are the kind of core skills. So creativity is certainly important in terms of critical thinking. But actually sustainability, the idea with sustainability is that very often we create things that are already there. So rather than working with the existing structures, we go and build one. You know, I remember coming into work one day with a guy who was like, he was a Spanish guy, but anyway, I'll tell you more than that. You know, he spent all weekend writing a piece of code, and he thought I was going to be one. And they said, wanted to tell me this, you know. In fact, the reason I stopped working for Spanish companies was that, like, as a jefe, I mean, the relationship between the jefe and the people who work for them is an extraordinary thing in Spain. I mean, you have people who are outside of the office are fun and great and wonderful, and then they go into the office and they transform into these people. It's like the Incredible Hulk or something. I like, don't know where it comes from. And I had this idea of, like, you know, because I came from the sort of environment where you actually needed the people you worked with. They weren't commodities, so I was trying to encourage them and stuff like that. And they basically like wanted me to be a boss. You know, they were comfortable with that relationship. There was like every time I tried to say like, how can I help you do your job? They would look at me with great suspicion. You know, so eventually I would just like, shout at them like the rest. Like that. And then they were cool with that because then they could like bitch about me, and then everything was fine. But when you try to be helpful, they were deeply suspicious of it. Anyway, off the point, but I'm trying to get some life into the audience because you guys are looking at me as if we're in like this Johnny Cash playing in the Jailhouse Rock, you know, and you guys will be brought back to your cells later. Anyway, there you go, bit of life in your organization. So anyway, this is this thing about sustainability. The thing about sustainability is that, oh yeah, let me finish my story about your man. Anyway, Toby wanted to tell me that he stayed in all weekend to write something. And I said, but you could get that on GitHub like in 5 minutes, you know? Like he'd written this whole kind of password logging feature. Like how many other people have a password logging feature? Like, do you not think this was done already? Like, why did you do it? Like, you know, small bit of thinking might you know help us all. Yeah, he was kind of sad about that, as you can imagine. But anyway, like that's the point I'm making, which is in many cases something exists already, and your job is to work with that, rather than trying all the time be building something new. So that's the idea of sustainability. And so that's if your innovation needs to be sustainable. And that's quite an interesting and complex notion. And where innovation is sustainable, it's actually really good and really interesting. So, there's more coming now. If you think that was semi-controversial, which sometimes it is, there's even more coming now. Now, this is when I start telling you guys you're really idiots. So anyway, Startup is an organization formed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model, and that's really what it is. And you know, surprisingly amount of people are unable to tell you what a startup is. They describe it in relative terms. You know, a startup is a thing that is, you know, in a place for startups kind of thing. Like, you know, if I'm in a forest, I'm a tree kind of thing. You know, so this is the notion. So all you're doing in a startup is looking for a repeatable, scalable business model. Nothing else. I mean, a business plan should consist of an insight followed by a list of experiments. Nothing else. I mean, 5-year cash projections and stuff like that is all rubbish. You have an insight, and then you want a list of experiments to verify that insight and de-risk it. That's really all you're trying to do. And you know, that's a very fundamental kind of thing, but very often startups are not clear about what they're trying to do. So every day you come in, and your only job is to search for a repeatable, scalable business model. Now, alas, like anything else you're doing is like nothing to do with that. And I see startups getting tied up in all sorts of knots. So you have an insight, you have experiments to validate that insight, to work out whether it's true or false. And that's really all you're doing. So a good business plan, as I say, should be a list of experiments you run and then telling me like what results you got. And this is, I hope you can see this properly, but it's the reasons founders cited for their startup failure. And what's really interesting about this is there's actually only one reason startups fail. So companies have failed and they don't even know why they failed. You know, this is kind of the remarkable thing about that. All startups fail because they don't find a business model. That's the only thing. If you find a business model, you can get over anything. So all of that stuff about I fell out with my founder. Well, you fell out with your founder because you hadn't found a business model. What else is there? Lack of focus. Well, you lost focus because you hadn't found a business model. No market need. Well, that's self-evident. What else is there? Outcompeted. Yeah, what does outcompeted mean? Didn't find a business model. I'll go on. Hiring mistakes. No business model. Poor marketing. Bad location. Lack of passion. Lack of passion. No business model. So basically everything is about finding a business model. If you find a business model. I worked for a while for Mark Cuban in Dallas, and what he was saying was this notion of You know, sales cures all is the thing he likes to say. In other words, if the company is selling, they kind of get over everything. It's the same with a football team. When the football team is winning, everything's wonderful. And then when the football team is losing, it's because you're not passing me the ball, blah, blah, blah. Well, I wasn't passing you the ball before, but we were winning. So it's the same kind of stuff that goes on. So this is sort of what you need to do. You need to find a business model. That's the only thing you need to do is find a business model. Nothing else, okay? So then we need to move on to this idea of scale-up. So what's a scale-up? And a scale-up is the idea of annual growth of more than 20% of people over a 3-year period and more than 10 employees. And I'm kind of much more in the world of scale-ups now than I am in the world of startups. I kind of think it's, in many ways, too easy to do a startup. And actually what's really interesting is a scale-up. So then we ask the question as to why British businesses don't scale up. This is just from The Economist, and they talk about British businesses. And they argue, like, what most firms need are management skills. And, you know, that's kind of one of those things about saying, I know you accuse me if you're from business school and you're saying what people need are management skills, but I really see a lack of very basic management skills. Management has become kind of very unsexy. You know, the word manager, I mean, I was in a seminar the other day and they were talking about leaders and managers. And they were trying to say, we need to make people into leaders. We need more leaders here. And I was like, well, not really. You really need a leader if you run into problems. Like if you have managers and you have the situation. You know, I talked about the polar explorers, you know. Adamson went to the pole, went back, you know. He was a great manager. He didn't need to be a leader because he did everything properly. You know, Shackleton was a wonderful leader, but he went at the wrong time with the wrong boat, you know, crashed into icebergs. It made for a great story. But, you know, otherwise, kind of, I hope his cousin follows me on Twitter, David, and might be listening, so sorry about, you know, trashing your whatever grand notebook. But anyway, interesting part is that that's it. Like, I'm into managers. I like managers is a wonderful word. It's just used in a very negative way. You know, well, so many stories I could tell about this. But anyway, so this is the point: is that managing is a good and important skill, and a healthy variety. And no amount of Dilbert cartoons or anything like that should trash you. And managers, you know, should be looking after the basics. Managers should be able to manage a situation. Just does everyone know what they're doing, and have they been allocated the correct resources? And you know, if you do that properly, you should never get into being a leader. You know, this idea that you have to kind of come in and drag heroism from your people every day. Not at all. In fact, I have, you know, there are many companies, like Twitter is an example. Like, you know, I often see on application forms to kind of do courses in IE, and they say, I want to be better. You know, I think our company is 80% efficient, and I want to be 100% efficient. And I say, I mean, first of all, it's impossible, but like, why would you want that anyway? Like, the ideal situation is that even if the company is badly run, it's still profitable. So if you make it a bit better, it's a bit more profitable. But then you have the idea, like, Twitter is an example of a company that's really badly run. Some would argue there's actually nobody running it at all, and it's still a profitable company. So that's what you want to be. So the idea that you have to be like this excellent company that does everything right all the time is just going to drive you absolutely crazy. So what you need to try and do is have an insight that of itself is so powerful that you have a kind of functionality advantage, and that enables you to be profitable. And then if you can get better, you can make even more profitable. But if anything that needs to be run at 100% in order to be successful, that's not going to happen, so it's not going to work. So, you know, that's what you've got to try and do. You've got to get an insight or something. So you have an insight and you have an experiment and you validate it, and then I'll tell you what you do in a second about how you go from there. But anyway, so this is another fantastic phrase that I literally spend in one of my classes in the Owners Management Program. I literally spend an hour and a half trying to explain the difference between growing and scaling. And growing and scaling are different things. Most companies grow, but not all companies scale. Scaling is a definite decision. It's the idea of capturing an exponential wave. It's a specific process, some of which I'm going to talk to you right now. But a lot of companies grow with what they actually need to do is scale. Scaling is a very, very different thing to growing. And this, you know, this is kind of what we're going to talk about from now on. So this is the most Instagrammed picture, for those of you that were waiting for that part of things. So probably shouldn't be as blurry as it is. But anyway, so this is the whole thing, right? This is it. This is the chuleta that you have going into the exam. This is the sort of what was he talking about thing that you need to do. So this is startups, scale-ups. This is what you need to know, right? So I'm going to kind of talk to you guys as if you're 2-year-old children, okay? So maybe 3-year-old children. So anyway, so you start up the company, that's fine, and you pivot. In other words, you have an insight and you experiment, and you do what you need to do in order to kind of get some traction, and you get some kind of, you know, this is the thing, which is that you need to have like a toothbrush test. You know, you need to have this idea that you have somebody who literally can't live without your product. And unless you're getting people who can't live without your product, you're kind of like, now that you've shown me this, anything else is inferior. That kind of wow reaction, like eating a new food or something like that, which is like, wow. Like there's some pictures on YouTube of babies being given sugar for the first time. And they're like, fat. And someone can go look that up. It's really there. So that baby is thinking now, I just want sugar for the rest of my life. I don't want any kind of carrots or any purees or anything that you want to give me. And that's the kind of effect you have to have on people. Now that I know your product is there, nothing else. And you need to have also this kind of anti-feeling, like if your favorite restaurant closed down or something like that. You know, that feeling, or your tennis racket or your pair of shoes or something like that. You have to have that feeling that your product is part of my life, and that kind of level of engagement. And until you have that, you have really no basis scaling up. If you do that without that kind of level of engagement, what you have is premature scaling. In other words, you're basically feeding marketing to convince people to get something they probably don't need or don't understand. So when you turn off the marketing, it goes away. I mean, the best companies grow from word of mouth because they actually do what they're supposed to do. And that should be the thing you have to give. You know, the best companies should have almost no marketing, in fact. They should just kind of work because they have a clear advantage. So you start up, you pivot. In other words, you experiment to try and get what it is right. And then you have product market fit. So you have the right product for the right market, and then you're ready to go. And this then is the big thing that happens, right? So this is the big thing that people don't do, and I understand why they don't do it, but it doesn't make it right, which is this idea of scaling up. And scaling up is all about doubling down. And that's the thing that people don't do, because as a species, you know, our evolution has taught us not to specialize, because that's kind of how we survive, right? So, you know, even if I said to you, like, all the clothes you haven't worn in the last 2 years, statistically, you're never going to wear them ever again, take them out. You still don't want to do it, because you think, oh, one day I might wear that blue shirt or something like that, you know? And that's the thing. So we don't like specializing. We don't like eliminating choice. We don't like doubling down. We don't like picking winners. We don't like doing any of this. But it's actually what you need to do. So you experiment, and when you find out what's working, you put everything on that. You literally stop all the other stuff, and you put everything on that. And that's the only way you're going to be able to scale up. That's literally the only way. And too many people are thinking, oh, we have 3 products. But they won't, it's because they don't want to call up the person and say, thank you for being a loyal customer, but we're not going to do this anymore. It's an awkward phone call. Or having to fire people or something like that. But, you know, it's like I said at the beginning, most startups fail. And of the startups that kind of, you know, start to get a bit of traction, most of those fail. So like really difficult to get anywhere. It's you know, it's a sort of like, it's like, you know, playing for Real Madrid or something. Like very few people actually ever get to do it. So the only chance you have is to specialize, and that's the thing people don't do. And I've given, you know, I met a guy the other day, and I remember I just got angry with him because like we talked to him this 2 years ago, and he's still with the same nonsense. You know, still refuses to kind of, you know, specialize. And he has a very interesting product. For that has video for airlines and stuff, and he just refuses to specialize. So, and I keep saying, like, this is the thing I say, I'm just going to say his name there, but anyway, let's pick a name. Oh, okay, no. Anyway, so his company isn't going to fail, like 100%, unless he has a piece of luck, which I guess is always possible, in which case I look stupid, but anyway. So here's the thing, so he's going to fail, but the thing is, he's not actually going to fail, because he didn't try, okay? So in order to fail, you must have tried. And he hasn't tried. In other words, he just kind of walked along with the same product, you know, in at the office and made phone calls and stuff like that. But he didn't actually try. And when you hear all these takes about failure and all this stuff, we failed. No, you didn't. You didn't try. Unless you actually, like, you only fail if you try. And you only try if you double down and give yourself a go. And most people are sort of, you know, don't want to do that. And instead of their startup like kind of collapsing and stopping, they just kind of keep going forever and then it just kind of stops in a kind of an unglorious sort of way. Like if you're going to fail, fail gloriously, you know? Like go down, you know, in flames, you know, go down, sort of like have some sense of adventure about yourself, you know? And that's what I don't see. I don't see people kind of, you know, worried about other stuff. So that's the thing. So you only get to fail if you actually try. And most people don't try. They just kind of stop. You know, run out of money or whatever. No. You know, pick on something, put all the chips, spin the wheel, and you know, at least give yourself a shot. So that then, if you do manage to, you know, get through and get escape velocity and all that, then you get product market dominance, and then you become a boring enterprise and all that. So that's the big thing you got to do. So to reinforce this point, then these lovely people in the communication departments of IE made this nice graphic for me. You know, anyway, so there's kind of 4 things that we want to go through here. And the 5th one is a kind of smart test point, so you don't need to worry about that. So anyway, the 4 of them is what you need to do. So here's the difference between scale-ups and startups. So a scale-up is about putting out fires. In other words, when you're in a scale-up, you don't really need to have a choice about what you can do. It's just about surviving. Every customer, you just yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. You have to just kind of kiss every frog. You have to do whatever you can to try and survive. Understand? Once you get to be a scale-up, you can actually start to light your own fires. You can actually start to kind of go where you think there is opportunity. In other words, you get to have some choice in what's going on. And that's a very different kind of sensation. It's not just about surviving. It's actually about choosing where you can go. It's like you're in a city where there's no food. You have to get food wherever you can. But if you're in a city where there's like gastronomy, you can pick the places. So that's kind of the metaphor. A startup is about finding out where you're strong. In other words, that should be your mentality in a startup, whereas you're trying to find out what it is, the functionality advantages that you have. The levers of competition are functionality, reliability, convenience, and price. I'm just looking over at Maria's heard all this before. I'm sorry, Maria, it's the same stuff again, always. But anyway, you've heard it before, but that's okay. So but here's the thing, that this idea is that a startup, so you've got to find out where you're strong, where you possibly have an advantage. And you must have a functionality advantage. You must do something that no one else does, and probably then premium price it. There's no point in existing. You literally don't have the right to exist unless you do something that nobody else does. Otherwise, what's the point? Really, what's the point? So you have to do something that nobody else does and find out where you're strong. However, in a scale-up, it actually flips, and you have to find out where you're weak, and you have to start thinking, oh my God, actually what could go wrong? Whereas you have to get rid of that kind of attitude when you're starting, because here's the thing, right? That if you're in a startup, you have very few products, very few users. If it goes wrong, it doesn't really matter. But if in a scale-up situation, if you're creating 1 million of your products and it kind of doesn't work properly, then that's a big issue. Although, listen, I often say that Windows was one of the most successful products ever, and it never worked properly. So, the product doesn't actually have to work properly to be successful. So don't worry about that. So anyway, generalists. I'm looking. I can see all the IT managers in front of me. Anyway. So, where am I? Oh yeah, startups are generalists. So here's the thing, that when you're starting up, you need to be generalist. You need to do a bit of something. So you need payroll, marketing, accounting, product, do surveys, whatever it is that needs to kind of get done. Whereas in a scale-up, you can actually start to hire specialists. And hiring specialists is a wonderful part of your world. And you really only start to get control of your organization when you have a specialist. And specialists are just wonderful. Again, using the sporting metaphor. If you've ever played with somebody who's really good at football, they get the ball and they give the ball. It's just, they make it look effortless. It's like no problem. They make everyone around them look good as well. They give you the pass with the next decision already made, literally, as opposed to just kind of shoveling it on, which is kind of the way other a sort of generalist kind of does. So this is the point about a specialist, and that you should want, as a startup, people say, why do you want to get big? And one of the reasons you want to get big is so you can hire specialists. And when you hire specialists, suddenly, you start, oh, actually, this is working quite okay. And until that point, you're literally at any moment, it could all be gone. So that's the whole point. Why do I need to scale? You can scale because when you get to a certain size, specialists will work with you. Because very often they require people with them, and they require a certain amount of resources. And they also, there has to be big enough of a job to do. One of the big problems with the specialists is that there's only, say, 1 day a week's work or something like that. You actually have to have 5 days a week's work, so they can constantly do this. So this is the idea of having a specialist. A startup experiments, in other words, you have a small, all the time experiment, have an insight of your experiment, whereas a scale-up simplifies. This is this big kind of insight that, still most companies don't have. And the only chance you have of scaling is if you specialize. And that's what you're going to see, especially as the world globalizes more in the world, more people get in contact with each other, that you're going to have people who have, literally do one very narrow kind of thing, but literally sell that to anyone. So you have, in Germany, has a lot of these kind of companies in the Mittelstand. They have 98% of the market for some very specialist thing. But, that's really all they do. But because there's enough of a market, they can be profitable. I have a sort of a smart-ass comment, which I know you can see, where I often say, a startup can make you famous. In other words, it can get you into the emprendedores section about pies. But only a scale-up can make you rich. And I remember I spent time talking to the Deloitte and PwC and these kind of guys, and they say the people with the money are the people you never read about in the newspapers, and they're right about that. So what are you going to do then? You're going to have to go to look a bit more like a science lab. So I know we're here in Google, which is the antithesis of the kind of very definition of what a startup looks like. Table football and video games and all that. And that's great, this is the thing you laugh at most, Anyway, so actually what you need to look like is more like a science lab, I'm not saying wear white coats and some goggles and stuff like that, but that's actually the mentality you should have. What's the experiment we're running? So you have an experiment, you have an insight that, donuts, that Spain needs donuts, that Madrid, right, needs donuts. So that's your insight, okay? So, let's talk about experimentation. So, donuts, right, should it be a yellow box? Should it be a pink box? Should it be a brown box? Should it be a blue box? Should it be a green box? Should it have paper? Should it have chocolate? Should it have sprinkles? Should it have custard? Should it have four in a box? Should it be a tall box? Or what, Anyway, I wanted to be an auctioneer, but I was never good enough. Anyway, but that's the point. You have to experiment about all of those, and you're never going to know what that actually is until you try it. Drucker also said that customer never buys what the company thinks they're selling. Anyone who knows as a product manager will find that out very quickly. People who sell cars, most people who buy cars couldn't tell the brake horsepower of their engine, but they like it because it makes a nice noise when the door closes, or there's a place to put your handbag out of sight. Or, people buy cars for all sorts of strange reasons, but very few of them can talk about like brake horsepower or these kind of things. So this is the interesting point that you have to kind of cover. So what you need to do is experiment. You need to experiment. You need to find out what it is that, Madrid wants donuts, but the form they want them in is a box of four, 2 custard, 2 chocolate, that can be delivered within an hour freshly. And that's what they want, And then you have to experiment. It's the only way you're going to find it out. So the other thing you're going to have is that you're going to have this notion that, just checking my time there. So the other thing you're going to have is purpose, product, process, and people, which is like basically the 4 things that I try and get people to work on. So the first thing is understanding why you're going to scale up. What's your purpose? Because not everyone, scale up isn't right for everyone. I would argue that for most people it is, but you certainly need to talk about the sacrifices involved, and is it because, your market is too small or something like that, but definitely you have to discuss the purpose. Then you have product, and product is almost definitely this idea of simplification. Simplification. Complexity kills, simplicity scales. I spend most of my time just talking about simplicity, just trying to get simplicity the whole time. Keep it damn simple. There's all this stuff. Picasso said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Or maybe Leonardo da Vinci said it, but I think I always say Picasso said it because that was the first. Steve Jobs said Picasso said it. Actually, he was wrong because Leonardo said it. Which is funny because he claimed to be an expert in Leonardo, but it turned out he wasn't really an expert in Leonardo. But anyway. So anyway, there's all sorts of other things about simplicity. The book The Little Prince, or Le Petit Prince, or something. Anyway, he talks about this notion of perfection in design is achieved not when everything has been added, when everything has been taken away. So taking away is the essence. Whenever anyone asks me to do something, I always say, what does it mean we're going to not do? And that's always, everyone, we come up with featureitis forever. What are we going to take away? And then one thing Apple were very good at, they took away like the floppy disk drive and the headphones and all that kind of stuff. So, taking away stuff is it's also a really good pushback mechanism for that really annoying person in your office. It's always coming up with ideas instead of fixing the things that are already there. I think it was Kurt Vonnegut who said, our problem with this civilization is that no one wants to do maintenance, and they're kind of right about that. This is the idea, anyway, that you need to simplify. Operations is all about investing in technology, and this lovely notion that the price of technology has come way down. And when I used to be in enterprise software, a database could cost you $1 million. Like Oracle I was like $1 million or something like that, and people would pay it. Whereas you can get like Hadoop and all these kind of MySQL and these kind of companies. So technology has become, the price of it has come way down. We should all be investing in technology, even as SMEs. We shouldn't be waiting until we're bigger. I have a rule in some of my companies, no spreadsheets. Nobody can send any. Emailing spreadsheets is an old way of doing things. All the information should be in the cloud, and everyone should be looking at the same kind of information. Sending around Excel spreadsheets is like, basically it's a sort of a, it's an inefficient way to run businesses. So I try and stop people from doing that. Anyway, Excel was designed to do something that was completely different than what people are using it now. So, these kind of like final version, Joe version, Tuesday version, version, whatever. Someone hasn't done any of the thinking. It's lazy thinking. So invest in technology, because what investing in technology does, it gives you information. And if you get the information, the right information, even a stupid person can make a good decision. So this is the point that you often see about people making bad decisions. Very often people make bad decisions because they didn't have the information. If you have the information, almost anyone can make a decision, right? So this is the kind of thing that you need to do. So you need to try and get the information as quickly as possible in terms of what's happening, and then the decision is very obvious. And that's a sort of, then that takes away this idea of being a hero and all that, but that's the truth. So what you got to try and do is invest in technology to try and get the information. Like the bar bill in Finland, I can get the bar bill in Finland on my phone. I can see exactly how much we're selling, like in real time. Like the cloud exists, people, use it. So anyway, it's not like my sister there. Maybe you've met my sister, but she lives in New York. Which is funny. Living in New York does that to you. She's like, yeah, like Mary, you're from Limerick. You should anyway. So anyway, that's an interesting part about operations. And finally, culture and team. Oh yeah, this part's cool. So all companies have cultures, right? And this is the thing that all companies have a culture. The question is whether you've actually sat down to try and set what that culture is. And actually, Spanish companies have got really good at this. And I kind of think that there's one thing that I got over talking to all of those founders that come to my class is how to get culture right. So that's when you go into Parklake, and you go into Spot Home, and you go into Packlink and all this, you see Cabify and all these, you see all their culture statements, it's like my legacy, if I die tomorrow, I can say, at least I did that. But you kind of told them that they have to write down their culture. Because if you don't have the culture, then, literally a culture will be formed. So you at least have to try and set it about how things work. How things work around here. Do we buy stuff in? Do we, have the customer as a priority? Do we try and do sneaky stuff? Do we not try and do sneaky stuff? Do we value lazy people? Do we value hardworking people? Do we value hija de putas? Do we value, what do we value? You have to have a culture. Okay? It's super important. So this is the idea. And then in the Owners Scaleup Program, we look at it from three ways. We look at you as an individual, then how do you work within your team, and then finally how teams work with each other. So there are three things that you really need to learn how to do. And there's really good research done by Google on how teams work. And the really interesting thing is teams cannot work effectively unless they're honest with each other about who they are. This idea of this pretense about trying to be someone who you're not is actually self-destructive. So it has to be what they call psychological safety. And it's a really important thing. I would require a whole talk to go on about it, but it's actually really important. And this idea of having a team effectively work together, it's quite okay to say if you have diabetes or if you have a sick child or something like that. I mean, I'm very open about when I need to go collect my kids. I collect our kids every day because, my wife works in a company, so she has to go there 8 in the morning and come back 8 in the evening, and probably only work for 4 hours, and the rest of the time she spends in politics. But I actually run 4 companies as well as teaching in IE, so I have loads of time. And thinking about that, so I can bring our kids to school every day and collect them. But I always say, when I'm looking at the time, and say, in fact, I said this to Maria about this time, that we have to start at 3:30 because I got to collect my kids. So this idea of being open with what you're doing, is a really important thing. When your football team loses, it's quite okay to say, I'm a bit sad today because my football team lost. Or if you support a team because they lose. Some people support teams because they lose. So if you're into that, you can say that I'm really sad today because my team won and I don't like winning. So anyway, that's the interesting team. So then you have this notion of it's never really made it too easy to start and too hard to scale. And then we go back to the company that we started, which is when we started, we set up Marrakech. Why did we need to raise 75 million? Well, because that was what it cost to do this at the time. There was no Amazon cloud, so you had to go to Dell.com. I mean, this is incredible. So I explain this to I always say young people, because of course I'm so old now. But anyway, you had to go to Dell.com, order a server, which would come in 2 days, take it out of the box, configure it, and then send it to a data center somewhere in Texas. That would take a month. Now you just go into Amazon or Gigas or one of these and just say whatever RAM you want and you have it. If you wanted to do an advertising campaign, now you can go on Facebook and you can select exactly who you want to target and sell them. And it's, previously you had to do this oh my God, you design a campaign, you had to do media planners, media buyers, then you put it into a magazine, and then you got absolutely no feedback about how it was gone and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just, all that kind of stuff used to take so much longer and was so much more expensive. Whereas now, there's, it's actually quite easy to get up and get in business. However, the downside of it is this, which is this idea of the end and start of era. And much of the problem here is that these big companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google, in a way, are taking away the space that startups used to exist. And it's a sort of quite a serious matter. That there are certain kind of areas that startups could have existed in that actually you have to be a big company now to play in that space. The technical term for this is an S-curve. In other words, there are times when a platform is created that allows everyone to compete at one level, and then there are other times in the S-curve when that's not true. And we're in this at the moment where it's actually really hard to be a startup, because a lot of kind of things that you do are now being done by Amazon or Google or something like that. So it's actually quite a serious sort of a message. Or in China, it's being done by Alibaba and Tencent. So the only thing you can really do is to have one of these exponential technologies. And these are like, this is not an exclusive, this is not a full list of the exponential technologies, but unless your startup has an exponential technology or leverages an exponential technology, it's almost impossible to get anywhere. Because anything that's like vertical, actually that's horizontal, anything that's horizontal will be soaked up by like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Salesforce and these people. So you have to be deep. So the only way you can survive as a startup is to have some sort of niche that literally it's like a small rare problem. So it's literally not interesting for Amazon to play in that space. And unless you really do that, you haven't got a hope. So we need to try and understand what an exponential technology is, and there's someone in your company that understands an exponential technology. But the thing is that these are quite expensive to do. I mean, if you're in drones, it's hardware, so you have to kind of have all the parts to fix them and all that kind of stuff. Even robotics is exactly the same. That's hardware, and even in AI, that involves an awful lot of processing and stuff like that. So the exponential technologies, AR, VR, again, it's hardware. So that it's not like Instagram or something that you just create a website and away you go. Like all of these things, technologies actually require a lot more money, and really what you're going to have to do now is get a lot more cozy with the corporate sector much earlier. I'll talk about that later in the Q&A if you want me. So understanding an exponential technology then, here we go. So when I did an MBA in IE in 2003, what most people had was a 64 megabyte memory stick. And fast forward to 2015, what most people had was a 64 gigabyte. Now that's an incredible transformation. It's almost unnoticed. Most people the sticks look approximately the same, the cost approximately the same, so most people don't really notice it. But the mathematics of what's going on are here, which is to say that one is growing linearly and the other is growing exponentially. And this is again where mathematics starts to be really beautiful. What you start to see is that it takes a long time. So when all of that is growing, that's doubling each time. But if you look at that, if you went into an investor and said, hi, you're going to actually make nothing for about 8 years, they're not going to give you money, right? Because their fund is 5 years or something. But that's actually where exponential growth comes from. So you should expect this to take a long time, and people don't really understand that. People expect this thing happens a lot more quickly, but you should actually be experimenting to get this edge for a long, long time. That's the game. This is the point where I'm saying that most people in startups don't understand the game. It takes 18 months for having a notion of what you're doing. It takes 4 years to work out whether it was even a good idea, and it probably takes 8 to 10 years before you create any value. And if you talk to people in Madrid who've sold their companies, nearly all of them will talk about 8 to 10 years before any real value was created. So that's the game you're in. There's no flipping, there's no shortcuts, there's no any of that. It's basically experimentation over a long time, separating the growth, and then because the mathematics of it kind of kick in eventually, and when the mathematics kick in, you have the real, here it is expressed also, you have this idea of growing linearly. And a lot of investors want to see this linear growth. So they'll be very happy to see this. Oh yeah, this is what we want, brilliant. But actually, that's what they should be looking at. But investors are bankers. They're used to kind of fixed income products or something like that. If the investors are entrepreneurs, they will understand this, which is why it's great to see that more and more of the investors are entrepreneurs, like Ander and Jose and these kind of guys. They're former entrepreneurs, and they understand exponentiality really well. So this is sort of what you need to have. So these are some companies who are exponential. And the things to criticize about some of these companies, but in terms of growth, they've done a good job. And the slides will be made available afterwards, so you don't have to watch or look at all of this right now. But basically what you need to do if you want to have an exponential organization, and you want to have one, because it's really the only chance you have, are you got 5 internal characteristics and 5 external characteristics. So these are what the external characteristics, and they're usefully spelled scale, but they're things like staff, community, crowd, algorithms, least assets, and engagement. As I say, I don't have time to go into all of them, but you can look at them yourself later. And the second thing then is the internal characteristics, interfaces, dashboards, experimentation, autonomy. And really, you have to look at all of these and see which of them you can leverage to have your own company. And this is like an exercise we would do in the Owners Scaleup Program, for instance. We would look at identifying your exponential components. So we would look at each of these things, staff, community, algorithms, and try and find out which one of these you're leveraging. And if you're getting a big fat 0 in all of these, you're really wasting your time. So here's an example, for instance, of an EXO canvas filled out with some of the things you need to have. So then you're probably going to say to me, okay, give me specific examples. So I'll give you some specific examples. So how does Spotify know you so well? Well, they have this really complicated stuff. So basically Spotify knew kind of what they were doing. They had basic, but the idea was how do I get people to do premium? So they had to create this function called Discover, which any of you use is absolutely remarkable for finding music that you didn't even know you liked. And how do they do it? Well, it's enormously complicated about how they do it, and it's enormously technical and mathematical. Now, what's absolutely incredible is that they, if you go to the technical journals, like if you want to understand about a company, don't go near their corporate blogs, don't go near their kind of, corporation type, happy marketing people saying absolutely nothing type blogs. Go to their engineering, Uber engineering, Twitter engineering, Spotify engineering, Airbnb engineering, IEEE monthly, all of these things. Like they're literally all the secrets of the company. It's quite extraordinary. I imagine if marketing ever knew about this, they would probably freak out completely. But engineers are like that. They're so proud of the good work they do, they want to tell them. So incredibly, they detail how exactly they did this. It's quite incredible that they've done. I mean, I sort of read this, it's like, how can they? Wait till you see what Airbnb. I think although the Airbnb one was pulled because eventually someone from the corporate found out that they were like, we can't tell people how we do this. This is like basically the secrets of the company. So anyway, this is how Spotify did, and they have all these kind of parameters, and they work in about like tone and treble and all this, and they use that to try and work out what songs you might like. So that's kind of how they unlocked it. So, and you can see that's, suddenly they hit the power curve. No big secret. Like you find out what works, and then they come. And Airbnb's pricing is something similar, which is there's lots of people who wanted to put stuff on Airbnb, but they didn't know how to charge for it. That was what was unblocking. When you're growing a company, you usually find that humanity is very irrational about something. In other words, that there's something that they want to do, but for an irrational reason, they won't do it. Amazon had this huge issue about delivery. People didn't want to pay for delivery psychologically, even if they would make these baskets for €200 and then wouldn't pay a tenner to deliver it. So then they had to kind of change it to put delivery cost into and then it was like free delivery and Amazon Prime, and kind of the rest is history. But the interesting part about Airbnb's pricing algorithm is this, which is to say people wanted to put their house or their flat on Airbnb, but they didn't know how to charge for it. And the really thing you don't want to do is let your neighbor find out how much you're charging for it, or feel foolish in front of your neighbor, or all of those lovely kind of king leave type dynamics that happens in hospitals, or not in hospitals, but in apartment buildings. So this is the idea of their pricing algorithm, and so they had a big thing about and again, some guy, some engineer, published exactly how they did it on the IEEE blog. I imagine once marketing found out about it, they really freaked out. But it was absolutely amazing to find out how they did it, and no surprisingly, growth came up. So it took them 8 years to get to 5 million, but 1 year more to get to 10 million. So once the thing kicks in, really exponential growth occurs. So this is the point, but be patient to get to the first exponential, because when it kicks in, it'll really kick in. The other interesting point I want to make about this is that you're probably saying, oh, why are you giving me examples about Silicon Valley and Airbnb and Spotify? And it turns out that a lot of the people doing this stuff in Silicon Valley are Spanish guys. This is basically one of their top guys in machine learning, who sort of did his master's here in Madrid. And you can see from his bio, all the cool stuff he's doing. He's basically the director of engineering for AMI, which is an extraordinarily high and important position in Facebook. And he's a Spanish guy. And a lot of you will know Javier as well. He's like a mysterious guy. Trying to get a conversation out of him once, and it dismally failed. but he's like literally Mark Zuckerberg's, closest guy. He's above all the kind of changes that have happened in the company. He's the guy, and he's head of growth. So I mean, there's never been a company that has grown as much as Facebook, and like it's basically a Spanish guy in the middle of it. So just don't believe that nothing is possible. That basically everything is possible. So we're getting close to the end now, the last 10 minutes. So I'm just going to kind of wrap up quickly and talk about the idea that entrepreneurship isn't about this idea of like flipping. It's more about building something slowly over time. And the first thing is to say that it does take a long time to build stuff. So typically the companies that are successful in a small amount of time are few and far between. Most of them take about 10 years, and that's what you should be thinking at. And most of the companies that are successful have really heavy intellectual property. You get a lot of successful people, and they're successful because what they managed to do is that they're working for a long period of time in the company and got deep sectoral knowledge. So they know about like logistics or whatever, semiconductors or something like that. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's actually probably good to spend about 10 years working for a multinational and get like really deep specific industry knowledge. And me as an investor, when I see a business plan from people who haven't got anyone who has like specifically deep sector knowledge, I wonder, is there anything in it? And these are the data behind older entrepreneurs, and I don't see a lot of older entrepreneurs in this room, but for the ones that are there, 45 is the average age of people who founded the highest growth startup is 45, so that's like quite amazing. So, if you're 23, that's fine, but you should probably go out and find someone for your team who are like 45 or something. People who have that experience are statistically really useful. That's, I don't know, again, there are some audiences who like to hear that, but, that's just the reality that, there are things that mature people, people with genuine experience have learned to do and are better at. In some ways, they're like festina lente, they kind of do things slowly and surely, poco a poco, rather than, diving in there like these kind of, people we read about in the newspapers. So this is an interesting point that, so even if you're like 35 or something like that, you've a long time to go yet. You're not even at the average level. So, don't despair, and there's still plenty of time to do stuff. So a couple of examples of these kind of guys. These are friends of mine from Dublin. Typical, master's degrees in electronic engineering, worked for ages for big American multinationals, spent about 10 years building something in a deep sector, and then sold the company. This is another guy, Pat, another friend of mine from Cork. He kind of, similarly sold his company, kind of, actually Pat didn't have very much education, but he loved curiosity, and he was very good. Curiosity would bring you, and he wasn't afraid to ask for help, which is a really good thing. So it's kind of interesting, because I tell Pat's story a lot, because he's an unusual entrepreneur. He's the kind of guy, he isn't like the kind of guy you read about in El País and President Laura's section, whatever. Sorry for slagging off El País all the time, but anyway. Here's the interesting point. So Pat isn't the typical profile. He started this in his 50s, and he went into wire wrap. So he was actually in wire wrap, which is kind of incredible. The interesting part about it is that probably wired or even looking at him and saying, anyway. But anyway, the interesting part about it is that when people sell companies in Ireland, most people are very modest. They kind of think, we don't want to stand out or anything like that, and our neighbours criticise us. But that's not what Pat has done. Whoops. Pat has actually joined the gym, started to get Botox, bought a big fancy car, and is literally going completely utterly mad. And I'm delighted for him, and he's using his money in a very kind of unusual way. While the other guys who sold their companies still haven't largely the same, Pat has gone a bit crazy. So I think that's really cool, and I'm delighted for him because he had all the disadvantages, and he managed to get through them. The other interesting part is that women over 50 are statistically the nearest thing there are to a sure thing for investors. So if a woman over 50 pitches you a business, literally don't listen to the business, just give her money. Because statistically, because so few women over 50 start companies, the ones that do are really motivated and to succeed and determined, and that will probably be the key. So that's a really interesting kind of a sector. So I meet a lot of people who've been pre-jubilada from the process, and they're available, and they're, I'm searching them like, why did you start a company? And they're like, but no, that's like, I read about, it's young people's thing. I think absolutely not, absolutely not. Women over 50 is a really interesting space, as is women over 40 for that matter. You know, you can read that article there, but it talks about how, you know, things about women can be, you know, ways in which women have to behave in the workplace when they're younger are not kind of, you know, not actually good things in terms of building businesses, but the, you know, the innate characteristics of women, statistically, the things that women are generally good at are absolutely the things you need to build a business. So that's another fascinating area. I'm not here to go into all of that, but just wanted to make that point. So the summary then is that what you need to do is a long time for experimentation to try and identify the product market fit. In other words, you know, you have an insight, you have a whole pile of experiments to try and work out what it is you want to do and to try and identify the product market fit. Sometimes it will happen easy, but usually it will take a long time. And the longer you can go, possibly the better, because then you'll find a better product market fit, and that will give you a kind of a moat you can defend yourself when other people then try and attack you. You need deep sector knowledge. And why you need deep sector knowledge is so you can't be GAFA'd. GAFA'd is Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple. So in other words, you know, you need to be kind of in the vertical rather than in the horizontal. You need to have that deep sector knowledge. Any of you that have a company that don't have deep sector knowledge, you need to go and acquire some. Courage is really needed, and this is this part about doubling down. And you know, courage is one of those things that very often we hope is never needed, but fortunately it's something that's very much needed in entrepreneurship, which is the courage to kind of, you know, literally gather all your chips and put them on the one part of the roulette wheel and let the roulette wheel spin. And that's actually what most people don't do. Most people fail because they don't have the courage to actually really go for it, to put themselves out there and go for it. So that's, you know, courage is absolutely needed. Management skills are needed to simplify, and this is, you know, things you can learn, but it's, you know, simplification is the ultimate in management skills. I mean, one guy I know in Ryanair, his entire job is just to keep things simple. Anyone who tries to jump up and, you know, innovate, he literally lines them up against a wall and shoots them. Because it's Ryanair, I have to say, that's not something that they actually do. Full disclaimer, because Ryanair, their flights are cheap, but their lawyers are expensive. So anyway, but that's the point I'm making, which is that they very much have a plan and they execute on the plan, and that's what they do. And finally, education is really needed. Whether you take the Owners Scaleup Program, which is a fine program, or else you informative. There's loads of things on YouTube that are like really interesting and informal, and you know, very few people have watched. So, but you actually, you know, I'm still learning. I've started 6 companies, and I continue to do companies, and I'm still learning. And you know, there's loads of stuff still to learn. So, last 5 minutes, then just a few references, and then we have time for questions. We have about 10 minutes for questions, I think. Well, I'm not in any hurry, so whatever time you're prepared to give me. So yeah, there's videos of me on YouTube. Oh, I'm wearing the same clothes. Oh, no, not. Some of the same clothes. Anyway, but that's interesting. This is me and Daniel. This is a professor I work with in IE, and he is sort of, you know, a Swiss-German kind of guy, very precise about everything. I wander a bit, so we're a good combination. And there's a podcast of me which you can listen to, which is with Intercom, as well as the podcast Maria mentioned that I did with her. But here's another one specifically on Scale Up. This is Masters of Scale, which talks about Silicon Valley entrepreneurs that have scaled. You know, again, there are limits into the growth. You know, one of the people he interviewed was Elizabeth Holmes in Theranos with that episode. I think he's been quite retired. But thank you. So interesting. Yeah, you can't get everything right. But anyway, you know, it's like everything else. You know, you don't have to go 100%, but there's interesting things about what they do. And blitzscaling. You know, there are questions about it in terms of sustainability and things like that, but there's certainly interesting things in it that you can do. This is the Scale Up Academy. This is a friend of mine, a Portuguese guy, Mike, and you know, he's doing some really great work, and he's very modest about it, which is, you know, he's connecting fantastic entrepreneurs, and it's on Facebook. You can tune into these things, you don't have to pay a penny, and there's just people probably in companies very similar to you who are scaling and who are, you know, not talking in their native language, so they actually tell the truth. And it's really interesting. I mean, again, my very simple idea, just get a few people who are scaling and put them on camera, and you know, these are, and actually the archive, the old episodes are archived, so you can actually go watch them. And you know, again, I sometimes I disagree with what some of the people say, but I think they're being honest and telling the truth, and we're all make mistakes. And then some books. This is Roland, who teaches on the Owners Scaleup Program, so he has a scale-up book. Eliad Gale, who's, you know, just came out last year, again, a really interesting scale-up book. And finally, blitzscaling, which is a term that's used a lot for scaling. I don't agree with everything about it, but it's interesting. It actually deals with indie techs, which is interesting as well locally. And then some other books, Scaling Up is Vern Harnish, who used to live in Barcelona. He talks about the 4 decisions, our people, strategy, execution, and cash. And again, it's a very good book, and I'd recommend it. It's very tactical, and he has a lot of success with like SMEs, rather than like Silicon Valley scales. The messy middle is this idea of you're not a startup and you're not a corporate, so you're in the messy middle, and that's Scott's book. And then finally, Bob and Huggy, they have a book. They're Stanford professors, and they were the first people to kind of write a book about scaling up. And it's very easy to read. It's kind of like a wonderful journey. It's like reading a travel book rather than anything else, but it's well worth reading. And then this book is absolutely fascinating. This is all about how scale appears in nature. And even if you're not, just want to read something for recreationally, this is a fantastic book. It tells you, why optimum stuff appears in nature. So why should buildings be certain heights? Why should cities be certain size? Why do some animals get small, some animals get big? It's just full of absolutely wonderful. I mean, it would literally turn you into believing there must be a supreme being because of all the interconnectedness in nature couldn't be around you. But it's absolutely magnificent, and it's like the product of a life's work. If I came up with this book after whatever, I'd certainly be very happy. So and then that's the TED Talk if you want I'm trying to, people ask me why I've never done a TED Talk, and I've refused it many times, because I think that some of them are just nonsense. I mean, there are good ones out there, but this is a particularly good one. So that book is quite interesting. I've also written a book with Daniel, and we're in the process of publishing it. I could tell you another story about what it's like publishing a book and things like that, but how the distance between writing it and actually publishing it. So that won't be out yet, and probably won't actually be out until next year now, because we've missed all these deadlines. So thank you very much for your time. My email is there for you to connect with me, and my LinkedIn. I'd be delighted if you could all contact me. I'm an AngelList. I'm on Twitter, tweet in 4 languages, and also then my blog, which is sometimes I update whenever I can. So thank you very much for listening. As I say, I have a few minutes for questions if you want to give me any questions. Thank you very much. Okay, yes, go ahead.
So what would be your advice if someone was pulled into a company that it's turning around from being a startup to a scale-up? Like, you didn't leave the startup phase, but you're being pulled in because of management.
Well, you need to fix your product, you need to fix your operations, and you need to fix your culture. Those are kind of the things you need to fix. You need to simplify your product. You need to invest dramatically in operations, and you need to kind of have a culture that people, even though people who don't interact with the founders, understand what to do in any circumstance. So those are the big decisions. But the first thing you need to do is be aware that scale-up is different to being a startup. Some people kind of still are getting bigger, and they're still kind of behaving in a certain way as if they're a startup. No. So that's what you need to do. Simplify your product, invest massively in operations, and then also start to take culture very seriously. And that can include firing assholes, people who can't work in teams, racists, bigots, all those kind of people. Get rid of all those. Okay? Yes, go ahead.
So there was a TechCrunch article that holds the view that now innovation is going to be just the field of the big tech companies, because it's
the one I put up there.
All the 8 areas. But then there's the opposing viewpoint that says, well, there's going to be abstractions and all sorts of help for. So you see it in the form of like AI libraries that are open source and they're growing. It's becoming easier and easier to harness those technologies. So where do you stand between those viewpoints, and what do you think scale-ups, how do you think they should think?
Yeah, I think in terms of, it's going to be harder to create like knockout. I mean, what I should do is I could send you there's a very good article in The Economist that actually written by their Silicon Valley correspondent that just literally talks about an atmosphere in Silicon Valley that people, it's just not worth setting a company because it's inevitably, if it gets to a certain size, they'll just buy it, right? And we know ourselves from like the last thing you want to do is create another password, or we want to have everything in China, everything goes through WeChat. That is the way. Apple were saying Chinese people won't buy their phones because the experience doesn't matter, because all anyone ever does is open WeChat and do everything within WeChat. So that's kind of. So I think there's definitely truth about it. A lot of our graduates go work for Amazon and these big companies, and literally they tell you. There's one girl I was talking to in the Middle East, and she said, "Look, we're just going to own this place in like 4 years." And she's right, because they have all the information, and they have all the. Literally, it's really. If you've ever, I've started 6 companies, I've been in the trenches, I know exactly what this is like, and you have to get discovery, to get people to know you exist is tremendously hard. And then everyone knows Amazon, Facebook, all these people exist. They have massive, people already have an account with them, a payment mechanism they trust, all the kind of steps that you have to jump through. So you can see how these companies have massive advantages. It's the same in travel industry, companies like Booking.com, the kind of advantages that they have. So I think the only space you could do is this idea of deep technical knowledge, this idea of creating a vertical in something that is not itself interesting enough for Amazon to want to get into. And that's using the exponential technologies. And I think there's lots of space in those. But literally, if you can be Amazon, you will be Amazon. And it's, we in hotels, we found out ourselves, when the big guys come at you, they really squash you. It's just, they just wait. But when they come at you, they totally squash you. It's not at all, it's not at all subtle. And so that's the point. So you need to have deep industry expertise, and you need to have something that literally is literally you can have 98% market share. I always talk about these kind of things, who makes this top. Amazon are probably not going to get into that, although you never know, right? Amazon have a very interesting business model. What they do is they look at they get bank accounts and they look at everyone's spends. So they get say my bank accounts, and I spend so much on whatever, a mortgage, car, entertainment, clothing, food, whatever. And they ask themselves, how can I get as much of that as possible? And they, they don't approach themselves as being in sector. We're not in the books industry or whatever. They look at where whatever people spend, how do we get that business? So that's why they bought Whole Foods, because they saw that, okay, when people are spending on food, let's have a food. So they're going for everything. They literally are going. There's never been a company like them. They're like, they're sort of, they're like the spiders in the jungle that you see that just kind of just multiply and eat everything in sight.
A to Z.
Sorry?
A to Z.
Yeah, no. They although, it's funny. I wonder if I make some jokes about Jeff Bezos. I was making lots of jokes about Jeff Bezos, I have all this stuff in my courses about how to be productive, Jeff Bezos productivity tips and stuff like that. Turns out he was sending naughty texts to news anchors and stuff like that. So, there is still time in the day to be efficient and still kind of your human being. So it's interesting that, what will stop a company like Amazon perhaps isn't their business model, it's the human factors that might get them in the end. And so that's the thing. So if you're in something that can be kind of GAFAD, you've got to get into something else, and you've got to get into something that is kind of not something that they were interested in getting into. Okay, long answer to your question, but okay. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, great session.
Thank you.
And I've got a startup, so we are in the process of this scaling up, as you mentioned. So we are hiring new people, we are moving to new office.
Yeah.
So, but it's what you said, you have to put all the chips in, but you have to make sure
I'm
that.
happy you got that. That's the thing I wanted to get across. Yeah.
But you should also be aware of the failure points which is happening over there. So it's a lot of risk and a lot of courage. You go sleepless some nights. One thing I want to ask is, you said about hiring specialists, but I felt this at this point, if you hire some specialist, he might not have a 5 days job,
Yeah.
So how do you overcome this kind of struggle?
You just have to get bigger, quickly, more ambitious, redefine the category in that kind of way. But, you ask it, until you're not really correctly positioned until you have a specialist working 5 days on the problem to give you that kind of, competitive edge, this idea that you're 40% better than your nearest competitor. And really, the only way you can be 40% better than your nearest competitor is if you have a specialist. You need somebody who's like one of the top 10 people in the world at this. You can redefine the category whatever way it is, but you need to have that. So it's like, again, in hotels, we had a guy, more about SEM than like literally he's one of the top 10 people in the world at it, and that was basically the basis of our company. So, that's what you have to do. You must have one of these specialists in your company who is like, regarded within the industry as being just like so much better than anybody else at this, and that then is the person you build the company around. And if you don't have that person, you have to have a plan to get into that situation. At least if you know what the problem is, you can then go about fixing it. So if I was to look at your company and you said, we don't have a specialist, I'm like, well, okay, well then make your company a bit more interesting so that a specialist will come work for you. Redefine the category, redesign the product, or whatever. And it's probably a red flag which says if you don't have, your product doesn't have enough of a functionality differentiation that it can attract a specialist who has enough to do for 5 days a week. So, that's the thing. So at least you know what the problem is and you know what's on it. Okay, more questions.
Does any of the books you've recommended has anything about scaling a culture? Or maybe you can recommend
The best one to read, there are lots actually written on culture. Oddly enough, the most famous culture document that was written was the Netflix culture document, which you can, there's a deck on culture. Now there's good and bad about that. Some people would say that it's kind of falling apart and it isn't really followed, but it has still some really interesting things. The one thing this guy, Laszlo Block, who's the former head of HR at Google, has written a book, and that's the one I read. He talks about how to get people working in teams. I begin there.
Which one?
It's called, sorry?
Which book? The Flex?
It's called, no, that's just...
Yeah,
no, his name is Laszlo Block. He's the former head of people in Google, and he's the guy who wrote he did all this research into how teams work effectively together. And if you Google him, you'll find it in his book. I think it's called People at Work or something. Also, the Basecamp guys, DHH, Jason, whatever his name is, and those guys are really good. Rework is a fantastic book called Rework.
Yeah.
And that's a really good book. And what else is there in terms of people? Probably those are the ones then there's the Tony Shea book about Zappos. I'm not so sure about that one myself. That worked for him, but I'm not so sure that it's still the right way to go. And what other books have been written on people? We'll start with those. We Google Teams and Basecamp or Rework is interesting. But again, this idea of getting people to perform brilliantly in moments is what you want to do, rather than kind of the industrial age idea of getting people to perform consistently. That's not what human beings are about.
Yeah, so maybe I've got another one, but it's a tricky one.
Sure, oh great.
Yeah, if you read these books, you get this knowledge, maybe most of the team knows what it's all about, but how do you get managers to understand these kind of processes and everything? Like, if this doesn't come from above, how do you turn everything
If it doesn't come from above, then it's got no chance, Everything, it has to come from above. If you're in an organization where it's not coming from above, leave, I remember I did my master's degree on disaster recovery, and I remember one IT manager said that my disaster recovery plan is my CV in my back pocket. If the company goes down and lose all the data, I'll just get another job. That's basically what he said. And I was like, research. I was 24, and I was like, this can't be true. Don't tell me truth about the world. I want to be idealistic about the world. So that's the thing. It's a flippant thing to say, and not everyone has a complete choice over where they can go work. But this is the issue I had. I just couldn't. I would find it really hard to work in a company where I didn't respect the people on top and that kind of thing. And there's a lot more choices now. Even a lot more people work remotely, for instance. Because you don't have to, take. It's not the question of you have to take what's on offer. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there, a lot of creative ways around the problem. But good managers are hard to find. It's one of the most difficult things in the world to do is manage people. The only thing you can do is create a sense of mission. That's about the only thing you can do. A lot of the companies that scale have this idea of having 1 million nights or something like that. I know when we were in COP, we were like working really hard to sell 100 hotel rooms, 100 rooms in one day. Like that was our big kind of North Star metric, and then it became 1,000 and grew from there. So the sense of mission, because that's what people want. I mean, most people leave companies. When they leave companies, they leave because of people. It's not the money or anything. It's just a cap, Yeah. And in Bethel, we have a new last, no? Samurai. So these was that guy. So anyway, so this is that's the thing. That's why most people leave companies. They just can't deal with the people anymore. And it's just such a mess. I mean, I can't think what it must be like to deal with that situation. I mean, just having somebody. But I know. You think of managers. There's so much of it in big companies. I just continually see it. And I don't know really what the solution is. But I see a lot of people, and I say that you don't have to behave like this. There is another way. Okay. Right. Yes.
Okay, so it might be like a strange question, but I think it's related to what you were saying about management. You can ask me anything you want. I don't know if you're familiar with Girls Talk by Alba. No? Well, it's like this model and activist who founded a safe space for girls and women to talk about anything without judgment or stigma. It's like a mental health kind of platform.
Yeah.
So I was thinking it would be like super interesting to sort of implement this in where I'm working and in other companies as well. Like I think there's so much taboo around mental health, and if people had like a sort of space at their work where they could just completely talk about anything and de-stress. But I don't think it would be like, I don't know what kind of strategies, if you have any strategies you could recommend, because I don't think that creating my own Girls Talk would be kind of useful, because that already exists, and I think it exists, like, it's super successful in what it does.
Yeah. I mean, the whole space is fascinating. The first thing is that nearly all entrepreneurs have mental health problems. I mean, is this an extreme or not? It's not a normal thing to do, And I don't be flippant about it, And this is, I think I mentioned coaching when I was talking about Seamus and the distillery. Like the pressure of paying people in Marrakech, we were paying 250 people a month. Like, do you know how much money that is? And all this stuff like that. And unless you've been in that situation, you literally can't explain what it's like to be there. So you need to have somebody who understands it. And I know many entrepreneurs whose names people would know, and literally they've just gone into a room and just cried, and like you knowing them, you think it was all smooth and stuff like that, and that's not even to mind the other stuff about relationships and things like that. So mental health is a huge. In some ways, actually, I think many entrepreneurs do what they do in order to feel normal. And this is the thing about serial entrepreneurs. The reason you just sold a company. Why don't you do nothing? And it's like. I remember a guy telling me, because then I suddenly start thinking I have cancer, or my hand hurts, and I think like they literally, like the only way they can feel normal. So, I mean, soldiers who come back from war say exactly the same thing. It's like, why do you go back for another tour of duty? And they are mountaineers. Why do you keep climbing? And it's like because the only way they can feel normal is in those extreme kind of circumstances. So that's the thing about the mental health, and I think it's great to talk about it. The second thing is there's an endemic of like. Among 14-year-old girls and that kind of age, there's enormous mental health problems. Some of it brought on by Facebook and social media and stuff like that, but also other factors whatsoever. And my daughters are 11 and 9, and I'm very, very aware of this. Very good thing in Spain is that people talk to each other. I think actually, Spain has very good mental health. The statistics for mental health are very good because, people, I see the way my wife talks to her mother. There's literally nothing she wouldn't tell her, and I think that's very healthy. So now, to answer your question about the idea of Girl Talk, it's very interesting. Thank you for I'm going to look into that straight away. And I think this is just the way it's going to be in the future. There's already all these jobs like accountancy and stuff that you just can't hire anyone. Nobody is prepared to do the job because it has no meaning. It's very hierarchical. Generation Z, want a different kind of experience and refuse to kind of play the game that the generation before. So companies are forced to do all this stuff, even to promote safe spaces and all this kind of stuff. They just have to do it because ultimately, if they have no people, then they can't do the job. So how do you? So I think that I think one of the things is that you're very early on in the cycle. So I think, which is okay. Like, that's just a normal thing. So I think this is a very interesting space. I think it will eventually become mainstream, but it will take a long time. This is what I was talking about how the length of time it takes to build a company. So I absolutely think that companies will have to embrace all of these things. I mean, it's just literally, the idea of, you're seeing it actually now with football. It's a big issue. I know I talk about football a lot, but, the days of people like Jose Mourinho anymore, like, he used to be managers and just used to shout at people. And people won't do that, take that anymore. The millennial footballer just refuses to say, like, you pay me 60 grand a week, you can't talk to me. So I think it's really interesting, and I think that also, and I think the other thing is that there are more women graduates than men in a lot of areas now. So you could have more women in the workplace. I think that will change, and I also think that perhaps more women are kind of. I just think all of that is, Hillary Clinton has this line that women are the world's greatest untapped resource. And I remember a few years ago, I just kind of noticed, someone pointed out to me that all my library was full of books by women, and all the music I listened to was all women singers. And I never noticed it before, but it's true. A lot of the music I listen to is by women, and a lot of the books I read are by female authors, because it's actually much more interesting in the same way. Because number one, it brings me to a world that I wouldn't be aware of. So I think it's a very interesting space. And I just think that first of all, you shouldn't be shy about talking to everyone about it and telling companies that this is really interesting. But I can see a situation where, having safe spaces and all of that. And I can also see, I don't know if you saw the Gillette ad. Did you see the Gillette ad that came out? Yeah, about more and more men speaking up, which is something I've done for a long time. I mean, often, as I was saying, I always mention like going to collect my kids. I actually bring my daughters to a lot of events, because by me doing it, because I'm a man, people won't criticize me, and then that kind of almost legitimizes women to do it. So, I mean, this is the role men can play on that, because most of my bosses actually have been women. And in technology, actually, most of the bosses are women. I mean, at one stage in Spain, the boss of Google, IBM, Nokia, Microsoft, they were all women. So it's really interesting that happened.
I'm sure this space, if they would actually implement it in a workspace, it would also be really useful for men. That's
exactly the point I make. I don't want to be. That's exactly the.
That's like also a big problem.
Yeah. No, it's exactly the point. I don't want to be. I don't want to have be machoed any more than or mansplaining as a different version of it. As a foreigner, sometimes you get mansplained or foreigner-splained. I lived here for 15 years. Thanks a lot. But I always find it funny when someone stops me for directions, and they hear my accent and they go, sorry. And I say, look, I lived here for 15 years. I know every shop, every corner between where you want me to go. And they don't listen to that, And they'll talk to some guy who's just come from Sevilla, who's never been in Madrid in his life, who tells them, oh, it's down there. And they listen to that person before they listen to someone who's lived in the same house effectively for 15 years. So I have some sense of what it's like to be mansplained. So I think that men should absolutely, but I think it's happening, and companies are realizing it's happening because they can't get anyone otherwise. People just won't tolerate it. I mean, before people used to complain but not leave. Now people just leave. They just say, oh, I can't, and they're finding they're huge issues, in fact, even like Google and getting into issues about working with the, Department of Defense and stuff like that, selling weapons, all of these kind of issues. And I think in that sense, the workplace is going in a good direction. So I would encourage you to keep talking about that issue, and I think that will, in time, be the norm, rather than the exception. Thank you. Again, a long answer, which is...
No, it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
The last question?
Yes, you can ask another question.
If there's not another one.
Okay.
So you mentioned that scale-ups often get their pricing wrong.
Yeah.
What are the most common cardinal sins, so to speak, and what do you advise, what are the remedies?
Sure. So here's the thing: as a startup, you're by definition creating something new. Okay, so by definition, if you create something new, the first law of economics is that scarcity is value. So if you're creating something new that didn't previously exist, then it's scarce, therefore it should have value. Therefore you should be able to premium price. And if you cannot premium price your product at launch, that's just a red flag. You know, it's basically a red flag. The other thing it does is that it transmits value. That if you come out as a startup and you actually your price is low, it kind of looks as if you don't really believe in it or anything like that. You should walk in there and say, you know, this is brilliant, and that's why it costs a lot of money. Buy 10. You know, that has to be the kind of the attitude you take. I don't see a lot of startups do that. You know. So the other thing is that, of course, raising prices is much easier than increasing volume. And a lot of people, it's just a mathematical thing. You know, but everyone is obsessed on volume. There's this thing that wherever we get it from about like low price, that you should always compete on price. Nonsense. You know, like I remember a lot of I was working with a company once and they were trying to do a relocation, and he's like, oh yeah, tell them the workers are really, you know, tell them that we can pay the workers very little. And I'm like, no, that's the wrong message. You know, people will pay 90,000 to their employees if they can get 500,000 worth of value. It's not about paying 15,000. In fact, they would prefer to pay 90,000 and get 500,000 in value than to pay like 15 and get maybe 100,000. So that's the mechanics of it. But pricing is just very badly understood in general. The thing about sales is that good salespeople don't actually sell the product. What they do is they work out how much the person can pay. So like the sales should be almost done, right? So the guy should almost, you know, that should have been done by marketing. So what the sales person does is that they can like work out the capacity of the person to pay and get and extract as much money as they can out of them, which is actually a completely different skill than, you know, it actually involves a lot of listening rather than a lot of talking. So those are the kind of skills, which is to say that pricing is about working out really how much the person can pay. But you do have to justify the value, because otherwise it's not a healthy relationship. But that's the idea, that you create something that no one has, and then you're not afraid to premium price it. And then perhaps over time you can reduce the price and increase the volume, but in general not. I mean, Apple make, what is it, the stat is something like they make 80% of the money in the mobile phone industry, even though they have like 20% of the sales. Samsung, you know, basically makes almost nothing on their mobile phones. I mean, they make money on the chips inside them and other kinds of things, because Apple have got pricing. You know, they understand pricing really well. And you know, when all these marketing professors are telling you to drop the prices, you know, and all this kind of stuff, they're holding the line. And then they need to create a new, you know. Now they're hitting a bit of a wall, admittedly. And I mean, if, you know, Steve Jobs had been alive, Apple might with a car for sure, and maybe even a spaceship, you know. So, you know, these kind of things are, you know, so Apple is, in that sense, having difficulties. But they got their pricing really right. I mean, there's a lot of technical analysis of how they've done that. And it's actually really clever, you know, about how that they don't just work out a loan strategy, they work out where the pricing is going to be over time. You know, and that's why they're very good at it. But yeah, the pricing is you know, almost always people get it wrong. And then also what you can sell in terms of how much is the sell and then how much for services. You know, going back to Oracle would sell you a database, but then they would also sell you services separately, and they would sell you premium support. And sometimes you were buying stuff you'd already bought. You know, it was such a complicated thing. So, but that's just a really, really important thing. And the more money you can get, obviously, the less investors you have to take. The less investors you have to take, the more freedom you have. Taking investors' money is basically a clock. It's like a clock running down. So you got to be careful about that. Okay.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Joe, for your time and for the meetup, and thanks a lot for coming here. Next week we are going to do a meetup with another expert talk. She's Alba Rosa. She has worked at 20 Autentia, and now she's developing communities relationship for Codemotion. And next week she's going to talk about automation in work. So So the tickets are now available. So if you want, you can check it or meet up. So thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. Anyone who wants the presentation can email me, and anyone who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn should go ahead and do that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.